The ceiling has 17 water stains. I know because I have counted them 4 times since I crawled into bed, and it is now 3:17 in the morning according to the digital clock that casts its green glow across my textbooks, my unmade sheets, the empty energy drink cans that have accumulated like evidence of a life I am too tired to organize. I cannot sleep. I cannot close my eyes without seeing it again, feeling it again. The weight of Marcus leaning into me on his couch, the way his laugh died mid-breath when our faces were suddenly too close, when the space between us became something electric and dangerous and real. His lips were warm, softer than I had imagined, and I had imagined them more times than I cared to admit, even to myself, even in the privacy of these sleepless hours when shame and want tangled together in my chest like something alive. The kiss lasted maybe 3 seconds, maybe 5, long enough for me to feel the slight tremor in his breath, the way his hand found my shoulder and gripped it like he was drowning. Long enough for me to understand that everything I thought I knew about him, about us, about the careful boundaries of our friendship, had just shifted beyond recognition. Then he pulled away. Not violently, not with disgust, but with something that looked like panic, like he had just woken up from a dream he did not remember falling into. He ran his hand through his dark hair, that gesture I have watched him make 1,000 times before during exam stress or awkward conversations with his girlfriend, but now it felt different. Now it felt like he was trying to erase something. "We should probably call a night," he said, and his voice was rougher than usual, scraped raw by whatever had just happened between us. I nodded because I could not trust my voice, could not trust myself to say anything that would not sound like confession or apology or desperate hope. I gathered my things, my backpack, my jacket, the remains of my dignity, and walked the 4 blocks back to my dorm in air so cold it felt like punishment. Now I lie here, staring at water stain number 12, which looks vaguely like the shape of Texas if you squint and tilt your head to the left, and I replay those moments with the obsessive precision of someone trying to solve an equation that has no clean answer. Was he drunk? He had been drinking, yes, but not enough to stumble, not enough to slur his words or lose his careful control. Was I drunk? 2 beers over 3 hours, barely enough to loosen the perpetual knot of anxiety that lives in my stomach like a permanent resident. The truth is messier than alcohol could explain. The truth is that we have been talking about loneliness, about the weight of pretending to be someone you're not, and somewhere in that conversation the walls we had built around ourselves began to crack. He told me he sometimes felt like he was performing his own life, playing a role he had memorized but never fully understood. I told him I knew exactly what he meant, though I could not tell him why, could not explain the specific shape of my own performance. The careful choreography required to be 20 years old and quietly, desperately in love with your straight best friend. Except maybe he is not as straight as either of us believed. Maybe the kiss was not an accident or a mistake, but something truer than either of us knows how to handle. Maybe that is why I cannot sleep, why my skin still feels electric where his hand touched my shoulder, why I keep running my tongue across my lower lip like I am trying to preserve some fading evidence of his mouth against mine. My phone sits face down on a nightstand, silent and accusatory. I have checked it 17 times since I got back, hoping for and dreading a message that would either explain everything or make everything infinitely more complicated. Each time the screen is blank, I feel both relief and disappointment in equal measure, and I hate myself for wanting something I cannot name from someone who probably regrets everything that happened tonight. The dorm is quiet around me, filled with the sleep of people who do not carry impossible secrets, who do not lie awake wondering if a single kiss has just ruined the most important friendship of their lives. Through the thin walls, I can hear the muffled sound of someone's television, a late-night movie, or infomercial selling solutions to problems simpler than mine. I consider getting up, making coffee, trying to study for the architectural history exam I have on Tuesday, but my body feels heavy and strange, like I am recovering from an illness I did not know I had. Marcus and I have been friends for 2 years now, since we were randomly assigned to the same freshman orientation group and discovered we were both terrible at small talk and good at comfortable silence. He studies economics with the focused intensity of someone who has always known exactly what he wants from life. I study architecture because I am drawn to the idea of building something permanent, something that will last beyond the messy temporariness of human feeling. We are not supposed to make sense together. He is all easy confidence and fraternity parties and a girlfriend named Jessica who studies education and wants to teach elementary school. I am quiet and careful and have never successfully hidden my queerness from anyone who bothers to look closely, though Marcus has never looked that closely, or at least has never said anything about what he might have seen. Until tonight, when he looked at me like he was seeing something entirely new, something that scared and fascinated him in equal measure. Until tonight, when the careful distance we have maintained collapsed into something I do not know how to categorize or control. My phone buzzes against the wooden surface of the nightstand, and my heart performs some painful acrobatics in my chest. For a moment, I cannot move, cannot breathe, cannot do anything but stare at the device that might contain an apology or an explanation or a rejection so gentle it will hurt worse than cruelty. Finally, I reach for it with hands that shake slightly, and when I see his name on the screen, when I read the words that will change everything between us forever, I understand that sleep was never really an option tonight. The message is simple, devastating in its simplicity. I can't stop thinking about last night. I set the phone back down and returned to counting water stains. But now the numbers blur together like tears I refuse to let fall. Outside my window, the campus sleeps on, oblivious to the quiet revolution happening in room 214, where a boy who has spent his entire life learning to want carefully, quietly, impossibly, finally has reason to believe that maybe, just maybe, he is not alone in his wanting. I did not sleep that night, and the next morning arrives with the brutal fluorescent lighting of the dining hall, where I sit nursing my third cup of coffee and pretending to read about brutalist architecture while my mind circles endlessly around those 7 words. I can't stop thinking about last night. They have taken up residence in my head like a song I cannot turn off, playing on repeat with different emphasis each time. I can't stop thinking. I can't stop thinking about last night. My phone has been silent since then, and I have resisted the urge to respond, though I have typed and deleted approximately 15 different messages ranging from "me too" to "we should pretend it never happened" to "please don't let this ruin everything between us." None of them capture the complexity of what I feel, the strange mixture of terror and hope that has settled in my chest like something with wings, threatening to either lift me up or tear me apart. I am 20 years old, and I have been carrying this secret for so long it has become part of my architecture, the hidden foundation upon which everything else is built. I realized I was different when I was 14, sitting in my high school's cafeteria and watching Tommy Mendez laugh at something his girlfriend said, feeling a longing so specific and shameful I thought it might kill me. The word gay felt too big, too definitive for the careful way I had learned to move through the world. I preferred the safety of silence, the protection of never having to defend or explain or justify what I knew to be true about myself. My parents are kind people who love me in the abstract way parents love the children they think they know. They ask about girlfriends with the casual assumption of heterosexuality, and I deflect with jokes about being too busy with school, too focused on my future to worry about dating. It is not exactly lying, though it is not exactly truthful either. It is survival disguised as discretion. Here at college, I have found a different kind of freedom. I have told 3 people the truth about myself. My roommate freshman year, who shrugged and asked if I wanted to order pizza. My friend Emma from Design Studio, who hugged me and said she already knew. And my cousin David during winter break, who listened without judgment and told me he was proud of me for trusting him with something so important. Each confession felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and liberating in equal measure. But I have never told Marcus, and not just because he is straight. There is something about the particular shape of my feelings for him that feels too dangerous to name, even to myself. Wanting your straight friend is a special kind of torture, a constant exercise in restraint and careful distance. You learn to appreciate the friendship for what it is rather than mourning what it cannot be. You learn to be grateful for the trust, the intimacy of shared jokes and comfortable silence, without asking for more. Marcus is everything I am not. Where I am careful and reserved, he is effortlessly confident, the kind of person who walks into a room and immediately becomes its center. He studies economics because he wants to understand how the world works, how power moves and money flows and decisions get made. He talks about his future with the certainty of someone who has never doubted he would get exactly what he wants from life. He joined Phi Delta Theta during Rush, not because he particularly wanted to be in a fraternity, but because his father was a member and it seemed like the natural thing to do. He goes to their parties and wears their letters and performs the rituals of brotherhood with the same easy competence he brings to everything else. I have been to exactly 3 fraternity parties in my life, all with Marcus, and each time I felt like an anthropologist studying a culture I would never fully understand. Jessica has been his girlfriend since sophomore year of high school. She studies education at the state school 40 minutes away, and they see each other most weekends. She is pretty in an uncomplicated way, with blonde hair and a laugh that carries across rooms. When Marcus talks about her, his voice softens into something that sounds like genuine affection, though I have never been able to tell if it is love or simply habit. They have the kind of relationship that looks effortless from the outside, built on shared history and mutual fondness, and the assumption that this is how life is supposed to unfold. The strange thing is that Marcus and I should not be friends at all. We inhabit completely different social ecosystems on this campus. Our paths should have crossed briefly during orientation and then diverged into separate orbits. Instead, we discovered an unlikely compatibility, a shared appreciation for late-night conversations and terrible action movies, and the kind of comfortable silence that feels rare and precious. We have spent countless hours in his apartment, playing video games with the sound turned low, talking about everything except the things that matter most. He has told me about his anxiety before big presentations, his worry that he is disappointing his father, his occasional doubt about whether he is actually good at anything or just good at pretending to be good at things. I have told him about my fear of irrelevance, my desire to build something beautiful and permanent, my suspicion that I am fundamentally different from everyone around me in ways I cannot fully articulate. These conversations happen in the spaces between other things, walking across campus after class, driving to get food at 2 in the morning, sitting in his living room while his roommates are asleep. They feel stolen somehow, too intimate for friendship, but not intimate enough to be anything else. Until last night, when the careful balance we had maintained for 2 years suddenly collapsed into something neither of us saw coming. Now, as I sit in this bright, loud dining hall surrounded by the ordinary chaos of college life, I understand that everything has changed. The text message glowing in my phone is proof that I cannot unknow what I now know, cannot unfeel what I felt when his mouth found mine in the darkness of his apartment. The question now is what comes next, and whether either of us is brave enough to find out. He finds me on the campus green 2 days later, while I am sitting under the oak tree, where I always go to think, pretending to sketch the Gothic revival details of the library facade, but really just making meaningless lines in my notebook while my mind churns through the same impossible questions. I see him walking across the quad from a distance, his backpack slung over one shoulder, moving with less than his usual confidence. Even from 50 yards away, I can tell something is different about the way he carries himself, something tentative and uncertain that makes my stomach clench with anticipation and dread. I have not responded to his text message. For 48 hours it has sat in my phone like an unexploded bomb, and I have crafted and discarded so many responses that I no longer trust my ability to say anything that will not make everything worse. What do you say to your straight best friend when he tells you he cannot stop thinking about the kiss he shared? What words exist for a situation that feels both impossible and inevitable, terrifying and necessary? Marcus drops down beside me on the grass without asking, close enough that I can smell his cologne and the detergent his mother uses on his clothes when he goes home on weekends. He does not look at me immediately. Instead, he stares out across the green where other students are scattered like pieces on a game board, some studying, some throwing frisbees, some simply lying in the October sun that feels like borrowed time before winter arrives to make everything harder. We should talk, he says, and his voice carries a weight I have never heard before. Not the easy confidence that usually defines him, but something raw and unsteady. I close my sketchbook and set it aside, finally turning to meet his eyes. They are bloodshot, rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that comes from too little sleep and too much thinking. I've been going crazy, he continues, running his hand through his hair in that familiar gesture that now feels loaded with new meaning. I keep replaying it over and over. What happened? What it meant? What it means about me? The last part comes out barely above a whisper, like he is afraid someone might overhear him questioning the fundamental assumptions of his own identity. I want to reach for him to offer some kind of comfort, but I do not know what comfort looks like in this situation. I do not know how to be his friend and also be someone who wants him in ways that friendship cannot contain. I haven't been able to focus on anything, he says. I bought my microeconomics exam yesterday. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Jessica called me last night, and I could barely hold a conversation with her because all I could think about was... He stops, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence, but I know what comes next. All he could think about was me, about us, about the 3 seconds that have rewritten the story he thought he was living. I'm not gay, he says suddenly, like he's trying to convince himself as much as me. I've never looked at guys that way. I've never wanted. I have a girlfriend. I've been with her for 3 years. I'm supposed to marry her someday, or at least that's what everyone expects, what I've always expected. His words tumble out in a rush, desperate and contradictory, and I can hear the panic underneath them. The panic of someone whose entire sense of self has been called into question by a moment of unexpected desire, by the discovery that the heart does not always follow the neat categories we try to impose on it. But, he continues, and this word hangs in the air between us like a bridge neither of us knows how to cross. But I can't stop thinking about it. About you. About how it felt when. God, Silas, I don't know what this makes me, but I know I've never felt anything like that before. Not with anyone. Not even with Jessica. The confession breaks something open in my chest, something that has been locked away for so long I had forgotten it was there. For 2 years, I have watched him from a careful distance, cataloging the small intimacies of friendship while never allowing myself to hope for more. Now he is sitting beside me on the grass, telling me that the impossible thing I have wanted has somehow become possible, and I do not know how to process the enormity of that shift. I want to tell him that I understand, that I have been carrying feelings for him that I never thought I would be able to acknowledge, let alone act on. I want to tell him that the kiss was not a mistake or an accident, but the most honest thing that has ever happened between us. I want to tell him that whatever this means about his identity, about our friendship, about the future we thought we were building separately, I am willing to figure out together. Instead, I say, what do you want to do about it? It is a simple question, but it contains multitudes. It acknowledges that we have moved beyond the realm of theoretical discussion into something that requires action, decision, courage. It places the choice in his hands while making it clear that I am not running away, that whatever happens next, he will not have to face it alone. He looks at me then, really looks at me, and I can see the war being fought behind his eyes. Fear and desire, certainty and confusion, the weight of expectations pressing against the pull of something new and unnamed. I don't know, he says finally, but I know I can't pretend this isn't happening. I can't pretend I don't feel something when I'm with you that I've never felt with anyone else. The words settle between us like seeds that might grow into something beautiful or might die in soil too uncertain to sustain them. Around us, the campus continues its ordinary rhythm, oblivious to the quiet revolution happening under the oak tree where two friends are discovering that friendship was never the right word for what they share. I reach for his hand, then, slowly, giving him time to pull away. He doesn't. Our fingers intertwine on the grass between us, warm and solid and real, and for the first time in 2 days I can breathe properly again. The days that follow our conversation on the green feel like learning to breathe underwater. Everything looks the same on the surface. We still meet at the library to study, still grab dinner at the student union, still text each other links to stupid videos that make us laugh. But underneath, the current has shifted entirely. We move around each other with new awareness, like dancers who have suddenly realized they are dancing. Our study sessions become exercises in controlled tension. Marcus sits across from me at our usual table on the third floor of the library, surrounded by economics textbooks and color-coded notes, but I catch him watching me when he thinks I am not paying attention. When our hands accidentally brush, reaching for the same pen, we both freeze for a moment too long, and I see something flicker across his face that might be one or might be fear or might be both tangled together in ways neither of us knows how to untangle. The jokes between us take on new weight. When I tease him about his obsessive highlighting system, his laugh lingers a beat too long, and I find myself studying the curve of his mouth in ways that friendship has never allowed. When he calls me an architecture nerd for photographing interesting doorways around campus, there is something in his voice that sounds almost fond, almost tender, and the word nerd becomes something precious instead of dismissive. Our conversations skirt the edges of what we cannot yet say directly. He tells me about a dream he had where he was lost in a building with no doors, wandering hallways that led nowhere, and I know he is not really talking about architecture. I tell him about my design studio project, how I am trying to create spaces that feel both open and protected, and we both understand I'm talking about more than blueprints and floor plans. One Thursday night, after a particularly brutal economics exam, Marcus shows up at my dorm room without calling first. This is not unusual. We have never been formal with each other about visiting, but there is something different about the way he stands in my doorway, something hesitant and hopeful that makes my heart perform complicated gymnastics in my chest. I was on a drive somewhere, he says. Clear my head. Want to come? I grab my jacket without asking where we are going. In his car, an old Honda that smells like coffee and the pine air freshener that hangs from his rearview mirror. We drive out of town with the music turned up loud enough that conversation becomes impossible. He chooses classic rock stations, songs his father probably listened to, and we both sing along badly to choruses about freedom and young love and the open road. We end up at Miller's Point, the overlook where half the couples in town come to make out and watch the city lights spread out below like fallen stars. I have been here exactly once before, during orientation week freshman year, with a group of other nervous new students who were trying to prove they belong to this place. Now, sitting in Marcus's passenger seat while he stares out at the valley below, I understand why people come here when they need to think, when they need to feel small and significant at the same time. The engine ticks as it cools, and the silence between us feels different than it ever has before. Not comfortable exactly, but charged with possibility, like the air before a thunderstorm. Marcus turns off the radio, and suddenly we are alone with nothing but the sound of our own breathing and the distant hum of traffic on the highway below. I keep thinking about what you asked me, he says without looking at me, about what I want to do about this, about us. The word us hangs in the air between us like something fragile and powerful, like something that could either save us or destroy everything we have built. I want to respond, but I sense that he needs to work through whatever he is trying to say, needs to find his own words for feelings that do not come with instructions or guidebooks. The thing is, he continues, turning toward me in the driver's seat, I've spent my whole life knowing exactly who I was supposed to be. Good student, good son, good boyfriend. Everything mapped out, everything making sense. And then you. He stops, runs his hand through his hair, starts again. When I'm with you, I feel like I'm finally awake, he says, like I've been sleepwalking through my own life, and suddenly someone turned on the lights. It's terrifying, but it's also the most real thing I've ever felt. Without thinking, without giving myself time to second-guess or analyze or protect myself from the possibility of rejection, I reach across the center console and touch his face. My palm against his cheek, my thumb brushing the corner of his mouth, and he leans into the contact like he has been waiting for it, like he needs it to breathe. Silas, he says, and my name in his voice sounds different than it ever has before, sounds like prayer and confession and question all at once. Then he is moving toward me, or I am moving toward him, or we are both moving into the space between us that has always felt too dangerous to cross. Our mouths find each other across the awkward geography of bucket seats and cup holders, and this kiss is different from the first one. Not accidental, not something that can be blamed on alcohol or late-night vulnerability or the strange intimacy that comes from sharing secrets in the dark. This kiss is a choice, deliberate and slow, and full of 2 years' worth of careful wanting finally given permission to exist. His hand finds the back of my neck, fingers threading through my hair, and I think about all the times I have imagined this moment, how none of my fantasies captured the reality of his breath against my skin, the weight of his body leaning into mine, the way the whole world narrows down to this car, this hill, this perfect and impossible moment of connection. When we finally break apart, we do not move away from each other. We sit with our foreheads touching, breathing the same air, and I can feel something fundamental shifting between us, some wall that has been carefully maintained for 2 years finally crumbling into rubble. The rain starts on a Tuesday, the kind of October downpour that transforms the campus into something gray and intimate, sending everyone scurrying for shelter. I am supposed to be in design studio, working on my proposal for sustainable housing, but instead I find myself standing outside Marcus's apartment building, soaked through and shivering, my backpack heavy with water and the weight of things I have never said aloud. We have been dancing around each other for weeks since that night at Miller's Point. Small touches that linger too long, conversations that stop just short of confession, moments that feel suspended between what we were and what we might become. The kiss in his car opens something between us, but we have been careful not to examine it too closely, as if naming it might make it disappear. His roommate answers the door, takes one look at my dripping state, and tells me Marcus is in his room. I climb the familiar stairs, my shoes squeaking against the hardwood, and knocks softly on his door. When he opens it, his face cycles through surprise, concern, and something else I'm learning to recognize as the particular way he looks at me now, like he is seeing me and also seeing the space between us that we have not yet figured out how to cross permanently. "You're soaked," he says, pulling me inside. His room is warm and dim, lit only by his desk lamp and the gray light filtering through rain-streaked windows. I stand dripping on his carpet while he rummages through his dresser for a towel, a dry shirt, and I watch the careful way he moves around me, like I'm something precious that might break if handled wrong. He hands me the towel and turns away while I change into his shirt, which smells like his detergent and something indefinably him. The fabric hangs loose on my frame, and when I catch sight of myself in his mirror, I look younger somehow, vulnerable in a way that makes my chest tight with unnamed emotion. The storm has intensified outside, rain hammering against his windows with unusual violence. His roommates are gone, probably trapped in the library or the student center, and we find ourselves alone in a way that feels both accidental and inevitable. We sit on his bed because his room is too small for anywhere else, backs against the wall, shoulders touching in the careful way we have perfected over these strange weeks of not quite friendship, not quite something else. "I can't do this anymore," Marcus says suddenly, and my heart drops so fast and hard I think I might be sick. For a moment, I'm certain he is about to tell me this has all been a mistake, that whatever we have been building between us needs to end before it destroys the friendship that has been the most important thing in both our lives. But then he turns toward me, and I see that his eyes are bright with unshed tears, and I realize he means something different entirely. "I can't keep pretending this is nothing," he says, his voice rough with emotion. "I can't keep acting like what's happening between us is just some phase or some experiment or something I can ignore until it goes away." The words tumble out of him like water through a broken dam, years of careful control finally giving way to something rawer and more honest. "I don't know what this makes me," he continues. "I don't know if there's a word for what I am or what I'm feeling, but I know I haven't felt like this before. Not with anyone. Not with Jessica, not with any of the girls I dated in high school. Not with anyone." He looks at me then, really looks at me, and I can see the fear and hope and desperate honesty warring in his expression. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he says, and the words hit me like lightning, illuminating everything I have been too afraid to acknowledge about my own feelings. And I don't know what that means about who I am or what I want from my life, but I know it's true. I know that when I'm with you, I feel more like myself than I ever have before. The confession breaks something open in me, something I have kept locked away for so long I had almost forgotten it existed. For 2 years, I have carried my feelings for Marcus like a secret that could destroy us both if discovered. I have watched him from across study tables and campus quads, cataloging the way he laughs at stupid movies and gets frustrated with difficult concepts and always orders his coffee with too much sugar. I have imagined conversations like this one happening in some impossible future where wanting him would not feel like betrayal of everything our friendship was supposed to be. Marcus, I say, and his name feels different in my mouth now, weighted with possibility and permission. I've been in love with you since sophomore year. Since that night, you fell asleep during the Lord of the Rings marathon, and I stayed awake watching you breathe and thinking about how much I wanted to kiss you and how impossible that was. The admission feels like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I have never said these words to anyone, have never allowed myself to believe that the wanting I carry could ever be reciprocated. I never thought I could tell you. I continue. I never thought you would want to hear it, and I was so afraid of ruining what we had. But yes, I'm in love with you. Completely, impossibly, desperately in love with you. He reaches for me then, pulls me toward him across the small space that separates us on his narrow bed. And when our mouths meet this time, there is nothing tentative or uncertain about it. This is not an accident or an experiment, but a recognition, an acknowledgement of something that has been building between us for years without either of us having the courage to name it. The kiss deepens, becomes something hungry and necessary. And I can taste the salt of tears, though I am not sure if they are his or mine or both. Outside, the rain continues to fall, trapping us in this warm, dim room where we are finally allowing ourselves to want each other without apology or explanation. When we break apart, we stay close, foreheads touching, breathing hard like we have been running. I love you too, he whispers against my mouth, and the words settle into my chest like something I have been waiting my whole life to hear. The morning after we say we love each other, Marcus does not text me. By noon, when I have checked my phone 17 times and found nothing but notifications about campus dining specials and a reminder about my architectural history paper, I begin to understand that confessing love and learning to live with its consequences are entirely different skills, and neither of us has had much practice with the second. I find him 3 days later in the economics building, hunched over a table in the basement study room, where the fluorescent lights buzz like angry insects, and the air smells of old coffee and academic desperation. He looks like he has not slept, dark circles under his eyes, and his usually perfect hair falling in unruly waves across his forehead. When he sees me approaching, something flickers across his face that might be relief or might be panic, and I realize that loving someone does not automatically make the space between you easier to navigate. Hey, I say, setting my backpack down across from him. The word comes out more carefully than I intend, weighted with all the things we said to each other in his rain-soaked room and all the silence that has followed. Hey, he responds, not quite meeting my eyes. His textbooks are spread across the table like armor, microeconomics, and international finance, creating barriers between us that feel both physical and metaphorical. We sit in the humming silence for a moment, and I can see him struggling with something, his jaw tight with the effort of containing whatever storm is raging behind his careful composure. Finally, he closes his textbook and looks at me directly, and I can see the exhaustion and confusion and fear that he has been carrying alone for 3 days. I broke up with Jessica, he says, and the words land between us like stones thrown into still water, sending ripples of consequence in every direction. I did not ask him why or when or how she took it, though all of these questions burn my throat like acid. Instead, I wait, watching him wrestle with words for a situation that has no manual, no clear precedent in the life he thought he was building. I called her Tuesday night. He continues, his voice rough with something that might be regret or might be relief. Told her I needed space, that I was confused about what I wanted. I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't tell her about you, about us. So I lied and said I needed to figure myself out, which I guess isn't entirely untrue. He runs his hands through his hair, that gesture I know so well, but which now carries new weight, new meaning. She cried, he says. She asked me if there was someone else, and I said no, which was another lie. She said she would wait for me to figure things out. That 3 years together has to mean something. And the worst part is that it does mean something. I did love her in whatever way I was capable of loving her. But it was never like this. It was never like what I feel when I'm with you. The confession hangs in the air between us, and I can see how much it costs him to say it, how every word is a step further away from the life he thought he wanted and towards something he cannot yet fully envision. My parents are going to lose their minds, he continues. They adore Jessica. My mom has already started talking about wedding venues, about grandchildren. They have this whole vision of my future mapped out, and none of it includes me falling in love with my male best friend. The phrase falling in love with my male best friend comes out jagged, like glass he is still learning to handle without cutting himself. I want to reach across the table and take his hand to offer some kind of comfort, but I can see that he is barely holding himself together, that any additional weight might cause him to collapse entirely. And the fraternity, he says, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. God, Silas, some of those guys. The things they say about people like us. The jokes they make. I've been sitting in chapter meetings for 2 years listening to casual homophobia and saying nothing because it never felt like it applied to me. Now I realize I was just protecting myself, pretending to be something I'm not. He looks at me then, and I can see the full scope of what he is grappling with, the way his confession of love has forced him to confront not just his feelings for me, but his entire understanding of himself, his place in the world, his future. I keep thinking about you, he says. About that night in my room, about the way you looked at me when I told you I loved you. And I know that what I feel is real, that this is the most honest I've ever been about anything. But I'm also terrified that I'm throwing away everything I've worked for, everything I thought I wanted. The words settle between us like a diagnosis, honest and brutal and necessary. I can see him struggling not just with his feelings for me, but with what those feelings mean about his identity, about the story he has been telling himself about who he is and who he is supposed to become. I think about all the times I have wished he could love me back, all the careful fantasies I have constructed about what it would feel like to have him choose me over everything else. Now, faced with the reality of his choice and the cost it is extracting from him, I understand that love is not just about wanting someone, but about being willing to sit with them in the wreckage of everything that love destroys and helps them figure out how to build something new from the pieces. Marcus, I say finally, reaching across the table to touch his hand where it rests beside his forgotten textbook. Whatever this costs us, whatever it changes, we'll figure it out together. You don't have to choose between loving me and having a life. We can find a way to have both. He looks down at our joined hands, and I can see something in his expression shift, some small measure of peace settling into the chaos of his thoughts. I can't keep pretending this is nothing, he says, echoing the words he spoke in his room during the storm. I can't keep living like I'm ashamed of what I feel for you. The words feel like a choice, like a door opening onto something unknown but possible. And for the first time in days, I allow myself to believe that love might be enough to carry us both through whatever comes next. 3 weeks later, I find myself back in a dorm room at midnight, but this time it is mine, and this time I'm not alone. Marcus sits on the floor beside my bed, his back against the mattress, our shoulders pressed together in a way that has become natural, necessary, like breathing. The space between us that once felt dangerous and impossible to cross has collapsed entirely, replaced by something quieter but no less profound. The simple intimacy of chosen presence. We have spent the evening working on separate assignments in comfortable silence, the kind of parallel solitude that friendship taught us and love has deepened. My architectural drawings spread across the carpet beside his economics notes, 2 different ways of trying to understand how the world fits together. Occasionally one of us would look up to find the other already watching, and we would smile, the kind of smile that carries entire conversations, the kind that says, I see you, I choose you, I am glad you are here. The campus sleeps around us, and through my thin walls I can hear the ordinary sounds of late-night college life. Someone microwaving popcorn, a television turned too loud, the distant laughter of people who have not yet learned that the most important moments often happen in whispers. But here in this small room that smells like instant coffee and the lavender fabric softener my mother sends in care packages, we exist in our own quiet universe, one where love does not have to announce itself to be real. Marcus reaches for my hand without looking at me, a gesture that has become as automatic as checking the time or adjusting his backpack on his shoulder. Our fingers intertwine with the practiced ease of two people who have learned each other's patterns, each other's needs. His thumb traces circles against my palm, a small movement that sends warmth up my arm and settles in my chest like something with roots. I still don't know what to call myself, he says into the comfortable darkness. The words come without preamble, but I understand immediately what he means. We have been living in the space between definitions for weeks now, learning to love each other without the safety net of familiar categories. You don't have to call yourself anything, I tell him, and I mean it. The need to name everything, to fit experience into predetermined boxes, feels less urgent than it once did. What we have exists independent of labels, independent of the vocabulary that other people use to make sense of desire and identity and the complicated mathematics of the heart. I know, he says, but sometimes I think about the future, about what I'll tell people, about how to explain this to my parents or my friends back home. And I realize I've never had to think about it before, never had to consider that maybe the story I thought I was living was just the prologue to something completely different. He shifts beside me, turning slightly so he can see my face in the dim light that filters through my window from the parking lot outside. His expression is thoughtful, peaceful in a way that would have seemed impossible 3 weeks ago when he sat across from me in the economics building looking like a man drowning in his own revelations. The other day, I was walking across campus, and I saw this couple holding hands. He continues. Two guys, probably seniors, just walking to class like it was the most normal thing in the world. And I realized I was jealous, not of them specifically, but of how easy they made it look, how natural. I kept thinking about how much I wanted that to be us. The confession is quiet, matter of fact, but I can hear the weight underneath it, the slow recognition of possibility where once there was only impossibility. I think about all the times I have walked across this same campus alone, watching other couples with the careful distance of someone who has learned not to want things that seem beyond reach. Maybe it could be us, I say. Maybe not right away, maybe not until you're ready, but someday. There's no rush. We can take as much time as you need to figure out what this looks like, what you're comfortable with. He squeezes my hand, a wordless thank you for the patience I am offering, for the understanding that love does not come with deadlines or ultimatums. We have both learned that the heart operates on its own timeline, that rushing towards certainty can sometimes mean missing the quiet beauty of discovery. I love you, he says, and the words have lost none of their power through repetition. If anything, they have become more potent, more real, each time he says them. I love you, and I'm tired of being afraid of what that means. I love you too, I respond, and the exchange feels like a ritual we are creating together, a daily recommitment to something we're still learning how to hold without breaking. Outside, the October night settles deeper around the campus, and I can feel winter approaching in the way the air moves differently, carries the promise of snow and short days and the particular intimacy that comes from huddling together against the cold. But here in this small room, with Marcus's shoulder warm against mine and his fingers steady in my hand, the approaching season feels less like ending than like preparation for something new. We sit in the comfortable silence that has become our natural element, watching shadows move across the ceiling as cars pass beneath the streetlights outside. There are still questions to be answered, still conversations to be had with family and friends, and the various communities that have shaped us into the people we are becoming. But those conversations can wait. Tonight, it is enough to be here together, to feel the quiet certainty of connection that needs no explanation beyond its own existence. Marcus's breathing deepens beside me, and I realize he is drifting towards sleep, his body relaxing into trust and exhaustion. I do not move away. Instead, I settle more deeply into this moment, into the simple miracle of being chosen by someone I never thought I could have, someone who has rewritten the story of his own life in order to include me in it. The night stretches on around us, unresolved but undeniable, and I close my eyes and let myself drift towards sleep beside the person I love, grateful for the uncertainty that brought us here, grateful for the courage it took to reach for each other across the space that once felt impossible to bridge.